if you as a human are capable of empathizing with an animal, which all healthy humans should be able to, do you love a dog? Do you love a cat? Like, your job here is Auschwitz guard for cows or chickens or whatever.
A few moments later.
Listen, okay, vegan is really difficult. Anyone who says veganism isn't difficult is full of shit, frankly.
Hi everyone. I hope you like the new setup and, more importantly, the new microphone. You can thank Natalie Fulton for hooking me up. It's finally time to up the production quality over here. Anyway, a subscriber sent me this video of Vaush reacting to a Breaking Point segment where Crystal and Sagar are debating Florida's recent ban on lab-grown meat. Sagar is in favor of the ban because, ewy, that's unnatural, while Crystal is against the ban because she's a smart lady. Vaush spends the majority of the video agreeing with Crystal and roasting Sagar, condemning factory farming, and surprisingly praising vegans. I've criticized Vaush in the past for his takes on veganism, and while he's not quite there yet, I think this video showcases a progression in his views on this topic. Overall, I was happy with this video, and it was nice to see Vaush display some growth and humility. The majority of this video will be focused on a comment he made about how difficult it is to be vegan. But first, let's appreciate his pro-animal commentary.
I have said before that I want factory farming annihilated, and that factory farming is a moral blight comparable in many ways to the worst atrocities man has committed against itself. The sheer, like, we're talking millions of animals dead like every hour, like minute. It's insane. Like, you can look at the numbers. It's ridiculous how many billions a year. The amount that we kill, it's insane. You know, you don't want to see your dog get tortured, but like, you're okay with that at a factory scale. Like an industrial scale, the number of chickens slaughtered are like a Holocaust's worth every hour. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty, yeah, it's pretty wacky. 1 million cows slaughtered every day, 202 million chickens every day. 140,000 chickens are slaughtered every minute. 8 by 10 inches, the amount of space in which battery-caged egg-laying hens spend their entire lives unable to spread their wings. 2 feet by 6 feet, average size of a gestation crate in which breeding pigs spend most of their adult lives. Yeah, I don't want to get into the whole factory farming thing. It's literally just like, here, 41% of U.S. land in the 48 contiguous states used for livestock pastures and range and animal feed production. Like, all of that land waiting for lab-grown meat is just techno-optimism. Oh, I'm not waiting for it. I think that factory farming should be banned, like, fully.
Vegans are constantly told that we shouldn't use the word Holocaust to describe animal agriculture. So it's incredibly validating to see a non-vegan leftist acknowledge the situation for what it is and not shy away from using accurate terminology. The stats he shared are truly unfathomable, and it was awesome to see him relay the gravity of the situation on his stream to a mostly non-vegan audience.
Could we still get wool clothing after abolishing factory farming? You're going to have to forgive me for my naivete, but my understanding is that it actually is possible to do wool farming relatively ethically. Like, of course, the way the industry is run now is unethical because of the way we treat animals generally, but you can have like a fairly positive relationship in that way. You know, you can do that, I think. Same with bees, right? For instance, like, bees have a more or less symbiotic relationship with the farmers that like harvest honey. You know, you just smoke them every now and again, but otherwise the bees are fine and happy. You know, they're not really like living worse lives than they would out in the wild. It's actually unethical to not shear sheep for wool. The same with milk, right? Because cows need to be milked, but we bred them to be like that, right? Like, cows and sheep used to be able to exist on their own in their older versions without needing humans to milk them or shear them. So, you know, maybe a little bit more genetic alteration would be good in the long run to make them slightly less dependent. But you know, whatever.
I appreciate Vaush's humility here, admitting that he doesn't know what he's talking about. The reason we treat animals so poorly is because we view them as commodities. If you rescue a sheep from the wool industry and shear them for their own benefit, and then happen to make use of their wool, which would otherwise be discarded, fine. You could make the case that you have a genuinely symbiotic relationship. But don't pretend that farmers shear sheep as an act of compassion, and that vegans are crazy for being against this practice. Vaush is right, these animals were bred to produce more wool than their bodies can handle. It's not like wild sheep need humans to shear them to relieve them of their misery. Don't stop shearing sheep that need to be sheared. Stop breeding them into existence for the production of wool. Regarding milk, Vaush is wrong that cows need to be milked. Cows haven't been bred to just produce milk. They produce milk for their babies. We aren't relieving their suffering by milking them. We're creating their suffering by repeatedly impregnating them and stealing their babies so that we can steal their milk. And if you're gonna say that honeybees are fine and happy, you're claiming that they possess a state of consciousness that involves emotions. If they are capable of experiencing happiness, they are certainly capable of experiencing suffering when we smoke them every now and again. I'm not sure what he thinks the bees are getting out of this supposedly symbiotic relationship.
Purely on just the psychological impact of slaughterhouses and factory farmers on workers is insane. So many suffer from PTSD or other mental health issues. Yeah, because it's horrible. The research reviewed has shown a link between slaughterhouse work and antisocial behavior generally and sexual offending specifically. Mental health disorders, coping mechanisms, crime perpetuation, violent supportive attitudes. Yeah, it's not good. There has been increased media coverage of the slaughterhouse industry as a result of the dissemination of online videos showing slaughterhouse staff abusing animals. Examples include using animals as a surface to extinguish cigarettes, decapitating animals and ridiculing their dismembered bodies, and inflicting abuse on animals as a form of game playing and entertainment. Man, I wonder if it might be kind of psychologically detrimental to humans to have a job that involves the mass slaughter of animals in an industrial setting. You're basically like a Auschwitz guard for cows. Like if you're capable of, if you as a human are capable of empathizing with an animal, which all healthy humans should be able to. Do you love a dog? Do you love a cat? Like your job here is Auschwitz guard for cows or chickens or whatever. So either that kind of job attracts those kinds of people or it makes those kinds of people. There's a reason why a lot of human serial killers start out by torturing animals. Aren't there some countries where you're only allowed to work for a certain amount of time in a slaughterhouse during your whole life? Yeah. The basically like this work is so inhumane and so damaging to the human spirit that you like shouldn't be allowed to have this as a lifetime job. You're not allowed to kill your own farm animal in the UK for this reason? Really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a thing. I had a friend who worked in a slaughterhouse and it really genuinely f***ed him up permanently. Yeah. Anti-gag laws are really... Oh, yeah. And on another level of this, by the way, there have been systemic efforts to pass laws to make it impossible and illegal to take photos of the conditions in these slaughterhouses. Like, there have been laws passed like, no, you can't do any The Jungle, Upton Sinclair shit. You cannot go in here to... Like, that is not lawful to do it because they're so horrific inside. Yeah. Agriculture gag laws emerged in the early 1990s in response to underground activists with the Animal Liberation Front movement. In Kansas, Montana, and North Dakota, state legislators made it a crime to take pictures or shoot video inside an animal facility without the consent of the facility's owner. How is it not unconstitutional? Some of these laws have been overturned as violations of the First Amendment, but they still exist to some extent. Australia, Canada, France, the US. It's not just the US. But yeah, that's why the footage in those horrible documentaries comes from whistleblower employees, not journalists or the public. Yeah. They're trying to like clamp down on it as much as possible. They probably have you sign like NDAs pretty frequently if you work in there as well. But isn't it that most of them need a job and it's a huge job source in certain states? I mean, that's the case for like all bad industries, right? You know? Vegans winning. Vegans are morally superior to non-vegans. This is true. I hope you guys understand. This includes you, Kowalski and Sake. That after any like pro-vegan segment, the people who are like, "Well, I'm still not vegan," haha. You're being scum. Like genuine. Like this. It's not even like it's the reactionary and insecure desire to like, wow, you're so edgy. This is like I did this when I was like 12. You know, like come on. I don't know why Sake does it. I don't know why Kowalski does it. I don't know why you just did it, Benjamin. I genuinely don't understand it. It's beyond my understanding. It's incomprehensible to me. I don't understand it at all. I don't get it at all, you know? Like, imagine if I did a big thing on, like, cobalt mining or whatever, and then everyone in the show is like, well, haha, still doing that then, you know, wow, whatever, those anti-cobalt users are crazy, you know? It's just like, well, why? I don't get it. Yeah, anti-vegan types have always been more annoying than vegans. Like, I, in my entire life, have never encountered a preachy vegan, but you can't trip over vegan discourse online without 5 million edgy 14-year-old boys going, duh, for every steak you don't eat, I'm gonna eat 5. First of all, no, you're not, you limp-wristed soy. You're not eating 5 steaks for every steak they don't eat. That doesn't even make sense, okay? And second of all, like, what is this insecure, you know, like, it's fundamentally reactionary. It's the same, like, emotional impulse that drives people to perform their racism or their sexism. Oh, you're woke? Haha. Well, I'm anti-woke. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same. No differences. It's just on a subject you feel comfortable exhibiting that behavior on.
Again, I'm very impressed that Vaush is willing to tell it like it is. He's basically quoting Eternal Treblinka. What do they know, all these scholars, all these philosophers, all the leaders of the world? They have convinced themselves that man, the worst transgressor of all the species, is the crown of creation. All other creatures were created merely to provide him with food, pelts, to be tormented, exterminated. In relation to them, all people are Nazis. For the animals, it is an eternal Treblinka. But it's important to mention that slaughterhouses have one of the highest turnover rates. Most people don't last more than 3 months. The vast majority of people these jobs attract are desperate for money, not psychopaths who enjoy killing animals. I see no difference between your average slaughterhouse worker and your average meat eater. Both are equally culpable. Vaush is really starting to come around though. It's nice to see a non-vegan leftist admit that veganism is the morally correct position, and that anti-veganism is fundamentally reactionary. He's also right that jobs, though, is not an adequate justification to continue a specific practice.
What they are saying, let's say the best faith version of it is basically in a lab-grown system. What does it mean? It means you have to go to a company in order to buy your meat. You can never actually be fully sustainable or harvest something. If you
Nobody is. That is a total delusional conservative fantasy that anyone, except for like a tiny fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the United States right now. Look at Crystal's face right now. Like, yeah, man, the homesteading fantasy of like raising a cow to slaughter it. It's the 21st century. And you know what? If the world ever reached a point where you could do that, you could just do that. We're not talking about banning the concept of slaughtering an animal for meat. We're talking about allowing lab-grown meat to develop. No, notice how Sagar is advocating in favor of banning lab-grown meat from the defensive position of assuming that it's going to be made illegal to harvest meat through slaughter of an animal.
What? Why?
Well, okay, because
people can still have their own cow. They can still buy their meat.
I mean, what if they outlaw that?
Okay.
See? He knows he's operating from an irrational position. He's just clinging on to the status quo.
Well, then you take a stand against that.
Yeah.
But instead of saying, hey, let's study it and see, and actually maybe this is healthier for people. Maybe this reduces the cost of meat so that people can have more whole foods.
It almost certainly will in the long run.
Versus the Lunchables crap that they're eating now. Rather than that, you're just like, let's ban it before we even know.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing that it is a culture-based argument.
Yeah.
I'm only telling you.
So this is him saying like, yeah, I am acknowledging the fact that I have no rational argument for what I'm saying. This is a culture war talking point. Like, this is purely vibes-based.
And he's lost the plot. I'm not sure why Vaush is so supportive of the idea of banning factory farming, but so dismissive of the idea of banning slaughter. He's right that proponents of lab-grown meat aren't necessarily advocating for the ban of slaughter, but why does he view this as such an extreme and ludicrous proposition? People are horrified by the treatment of animals on factory farms. Mutilating, branding, caging, and kicking animals are all viewed as horrific, but a knife to the throat is somehow acceptable? I think this view stems from the belief that eating animal products is necessary. Like, if it were truly necessary, I could understand justifying slaughter but not abuse. But given that consuming animal products is completely unnecessary, and Vaush later admits that it is possible to be a healthy vegan, why is slaughter not viewed as even more horrific than abuse? There are certain things where the problem lies in the scale at which it's being done, such as clothing production. The production of an individual shirt is not unethical, but fast fashion clearly is. However, this is not the case with animal agriculture. The slaughter of an individual cow in your backyard is unethical. You are taking the life of an animal who doesn't want to die. And Vaush made the point earlier that people don't want to see their dogs treated this way, but they don't think twice about the cows, pigs, and chickens they're eating. But he probably wouldn't laugh at the idea of banning dog slaughter. It's already illegal, as it should be. Factory farming isn't the problem, it's a symptom of the problem. It's the manifestation of viewing animals as commodities rather than sentient beings. Vaush is operating from a speciesist framework. He views dogs as individuals, but he views cows, pigs, and chickens as food. Hence why he likely supports the ban of dog slaughter, but not the ban of slaughter in general. Sagar is not being irrational when he asks, "What's next? Banning animal slaughter?" In fact, yes. I will not hide my motives. I want to outlaw animal slaughter. This is a perfectly rational position to take. What's irrational is the exclusion of livestock from federal animal welfare laws.
For people who are actually interested in going vegan, what are some resources? Okay, listen, okay? Vegan is really difficult. Vegetarian is a lot easier, and you're getting like 80% of the way there through vegetarian. A lot of the worst practices of animal cultivation and farming are in the meat. I'm not saying that there's no harm in the eggs or the dairy or the whatever else, but like start with the meat, okay? Like start with vegetarian, right? So if you're going to do that, like, okay, going from like regular to vegetarian is relatively easy nowadays. You have access to so many protein options that aren't meat-based, and like, honest to God, recreation meat really isn't that bad. You make such good stuff with like mushrooms and beans. I don't even like mushrooms, and I've had mushroom-based burgers and they're pretty good, you know. Vegan is a lot more difficult because then you're cutting out like a lot of critical sources of protein and fat that you would otherwise normally get, you know. I'm not saying it's impossible, but step one would be, could I make it so I don't eat any meat on this day, like on Sunday? And then what if like, okay, what if Sunday and Friday I don't have meat, you know? Or like, okay, what about 3 days a week, then 4 days a week, then 5 days a week? And then eventually like, okay, what if I have meat just 1 day a week? And then you don't. And like, that would be the start there. And the point is to develop like you want to get better at learning how to make the meals that make you feel the kind of happy that you do when you have a big steak dinner, you know, which you can do vegetarian. Like you can do that, right? Like it's not that difficult either. It's just a different language of food. You just need to like, you know, okay, let me try this thing. Let me try this thing. Do that for a few weeks. And then like, eventually you'll go like, oh, okay, well, that's actually really good, you know? And it's about building the habit as well. It's totally doable. Most restaurants have vegetarian options these days, making it easier and easier to go out and have fun with your friends without having to like, you know, oh, I can't eat at this place or whatever, that kind of stuff, you know?
You're not 80% there by going vegetarian. First of all, egg-laying hens and dairy cows are inevitably killed for their meat. There's no way to produce eggs or dairy at the present scale of demand without killing the animals. They become spent after a few years of repeated impregnation and brutal exploitation. What are you suggesting farmers do? Let them live out the rest of their lives on sanctuaries? That would require a fuck ton of resources. It's not economically or environmentally feasible. Second, female cows and chickens experience a greater degree of exploitation than bulls and broiler chickens raised for meat. Having to lay eggs or be milked constantly is incredibly taxing on their bodies. These industries are arguably worse because the suffering is prolonged.
Can you explain why you think going vegan/vegetarian are good, but things like boycotting companies for Palestine aren't? Because, for one, there's a more direct relationship to harm with going vegan/vegetarian. And for two, the problem that I have with boycotts isn't a person's decision to boycott. It's the fact that like it's like a broadly ineffective strategy that takes attention away from other things you could do, and it leads to a lot of purity testing within the movement. For instance, I think that like choosing to be vegan or vegetarian is something that you can do in your life that like, you know, is pretty doable, at least the vegetarian thing. Veganism is tough. Anyone who says veganism isn't difficult is full of shit, frankly. You know, but you can do the vegetarian bit. And that can be like a part of your life or whatever. And I think that is a good thing. Whereas with like the boycotting thing, I don't mind if you boycott like McDonald's or whatever. I don't give a shit if you don't eat at McDonald's. Like, have I ever gone like, no, you should eat at McDonald's? Like, no, I don't care if you don't eat at McDonald's. What I care about is the like social media craze of transforming advocacy movements into like it's something that is being centered by whether or not you're on the right side by hating these companies or those other companies, you know? Like, that's the thing that bothers me, I guess. So like, if you want to boycott, okay, fine. It's just that always turns into like a centerpiece of the movement, and it's so often really ineffective. Likewise, I really don't think that anti-animal agriculture advocacy should be centered by people choosing to be vegetarian or vegan. You know what I mean? Why aren't you vegan/vegetarian if you agree they're morally and otherwise correct? I don't go to McDonald's because I think their food is garbage, not because I have a moral objection to going to McDonald's. And I do, in fact, buy things that have like cobalt that were mined by child slaves in them. Um, Look, I think it is better to do that. I think it is good to do good things. I don't do all good things, but we should always strive to. My problem has more to do with like the purity testing of people who don't do all the good things. You know, I talked about this a lot more back earlier in my channel, but there is always this like self-destructive and seditious intention from some people, I feel, to take what should be a good moral decision and to make it into a fulcrum to purity test others, and in a way that almost always destroys the movement. I don't think that like progressive advocacy has ever been improved by beleaguering people into making better consumptive decisions, with some like very specific exceptions. Like I would have to think about specific exceptions to this, you know? Does that make any sense? I think that for the most part, you know, it's you encourage people to do good. You try to do the good you can. Nobody's going to do good in all ways. I drive a car rather than biking. I eat meat, though honestly not that much, really, realistically. Like I'm a pretty lean pretty hard in the beans and rice lately. You know, purely like for dieting reasons, frankly, but like stuff like that, you know. And it's like the littering thing as well, right? To an extent, you know, like I don't think people should litter. Obviously, littering is bad. But it's also like there's a broader systemic issue to focus on. It kind of all feeds into like the individual consumptive decisions versus the broader systemic change. It would be a lot easier for everyone to be vegetarian or even vegan if we just got rid of animal agriculture, you know? And to that extent, that's kind of like the goal.
Vaush claims that anyone who says veganism isn't difficult is full of shit. Let's talk about this. What holds a lot of people back from going vegan is this belief that it involves some grand sacrifice. But beliefs aren't always based on truth. Unfortunately, Vaush is reinforcing this false narrative. I don't know why this chatter is asking Vaush for practical tips on going vegan when he isn't vegan. Of course, someone who has never made a serious attempt to be vegan is going to think that it's incredibly difficult. They wouldn't fucking know. Ask a vegan and they'll tell you that it's much easier than they thought it would be. I can't say it's easy for everyone, but easy and hard are relative terms. For many people, it's relatively easy to be vegan. Sure, it's easier if you have money, but everything is easier if you have money. And sure, it's easier if you live in a big city, but you'd be surprised what you can find at the Piggly Wiggly in rural Wisconsin. I was recently in bumfuck Tennessee, and I found a gas station that had vegan empanadas. There's a little bit of a learning curve when you first transition, but after a few months, it requires no more effort to plan your meals. I spend no more time cooking or grocery shopping than I did before. Honestly, it's easier to prepare vegan food because you don't have to worry as much about fucking pathogens, and you don't have to sacrifice taste pleasure. There is such an abundance of delicious plant-based food that in a supportive social environment, more on that later, you won't feel deprived. There are things that I quote-unquote miss, but I don't miss them in the sense that I feel deprived without them. For example, the other day I was at the grocery store and I saw these strawberry shortcake ice cream bars that I loved as a kid. And I got so excited because it was this brand of ice cream that has a lot of vegan flavors, so I thought they were vegan. When I realized they weren't, I was bummed, but this emotion lasted for all of 10 seconds. I picked another flavor out of the huge selection of vegan ice cream and went home perfectly satisfied. I don't think I've ever found myself in a situation where there were no vegan options. And whenever I'm at a wedding or something where vegan options are scarce, I'm genuinely not that bothered by having to eat something bland for one night. What bothers me is that other people are looking at my plate and thinking how difficult it must be to be vegan. They are totally unaware of the fucking bounty of delicious vegan food that exists, and think that vegan food is just sad salad and cauliflower steak. They think that going vegan would mean sacrificing their favorite foods, when in reality it means swapping out animal-based ingredients with plant-based ingredients. Nearly all of your favorite foods can be veganized. And before you say, yeah, but vegan cheese tastes like ass, shut the fuck up and consider the fact that you have no idea what you're talking about. Because you have a very limited perspective based on that one time you tried vegan pizza at a restaurant that laid on the day of cheese. I promise there is vegan cheese out there that will satisfy your cheese cravings. If you tried my stuffed shells or lasagna, you would concede. If you're thinking most people who go vegan end up quitting, so it must be difficult, you're not entirely wrong, but you're missing some context. For one, many people conflate veganism with a plant-based diet. Most people who attempt a specific diet end up quitting. If you approach veganism as a diet, you'll likely fall off the wagon. I'm not one of those vegans who claims that anyone who quits veganism was never actually vegan. But this 84% of vegans quit stat that gets thrown around all the time is misleading. Unfortunately, humans are capable of repressing their empathy, so some revert back to their old ways despite once genuinely caring. Most quit because they lacked social support, not because it was difficult to find vegan options. Think about it. You're going out to eat with friends. If you have supportive friends, they'll be accommodating and willing to pick a restaurant that has good vegan food. If you don't have supportive friends, they'll drag you to an Outback Steakhouse or some shit, where you're forced to eat a sad salad and fries. It's not that satisfying vegan options are lacking in your area, it's that your friends suck. Another reason people quit is that they lack a proper understanding of nutrition science and are therefore susceptible to misinformation about the difficulty of meeting your nutritional needs on a plant-based diet. They may develop some health condition and be convinced that fish and eggs have magical healing properties that plant foods lack. It's not that it's more difficult to design a well-balanced diet that is plant-based. It's that society has brainwashed you into believing that it is. And beliefs are very powerful, as evident by the placebo effect. Vaush is simply wrong when he says that vegans are cutting out a lot of critical sources of protein and fat. We have mountains of data showing that plant-based sources of protein and fat produce better health outcomes. What's frustrating about Vaush claiming veganism is too hard is that I've heard him harp about the importance of discipline and personal responsibility. Like myself, Vaush is a leftist who acknowledges these are universal values, not conservative ones. He acknowledges that obesity, for example, is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed through policy change. But at the same time, individuals have some degree of agency in their lives. He was able to lose weight by changing his eating and exercise habits. If you have the self-discipline to lose weight, you certainly have the self-discipline to go vegan. I've never been overweight, but intuitively, it seems like losing weight requires a lot more self-discipline than going vegan. I polled my audience on whether being vegan requires self-discipline, and while many of you answered at least some, the fact that 22% answered none tells me that my intuition is probably accurate. I think what holds a lot of people back from losing weight is not that it's hard, but the belief that it'll be hard forever. We often hear that the majority of people who lose weight will regain it, suggesting that maintaining weight loss is more difficult than losing weight in the first place. Again, I don't have personal experience in this area, but having listened to the experiences of people like Obese to Beast, this isn't necessarily the case. Knowledge is power. For him, losing weight required a lot of self-discipline. But now that he's equipped himself with knowledge about nutrition, he is able to eat mindfully, exerting some, but not a lot, of self-control to maintain his weight. Similarly, going vegan may require some self-control, but once you've equipped yourself with the knowledge of what to eat and what goes on in these industries, it doesn't require much at all, if any, to be vegan. For me, exercise requires some degree of self-discipline. There are days when it does and days when it doesn't. My commission-only sales job requires a fair amount of self-discipline. Activism also requires a fair amount of self-discipline. Getting out there to canvas, editing these videos, it's a labor of love. But being vegan requires zero self-discipline. Animal products are repulsive to me. A lot of you expressed a similar sentiment in the comments on my poll. Matthew Thomas commented, "I have severe ADHD and basically no capacity for self-discipline whatsoever. Never been able to stick to any sort of diet, exercise routine, or any other habit I've wanted to develop. I went vegan on the spot 7 years ago after seeing Gary Yourofsky's speech and never had any difficulty. Haven't once had any desire or temptation to abuse animals that I've had to fight. It just became something that was completely off the table from that point on. Not eating junk food, maintaining an exercise regimen, practicing good sleep hygiene, etc. These are all things I should do, and are thus subject to my self-discipline capacities. Being vegan is something I have no choice but to do, because the alternative is horrifying. It's a moral imperative that gets governed by a different section of my brain entirely than that which governs self-discipline. It's important to have a strong why. To make a lasting lifestyle change, you have to want something enough. The difference is that Vaush wanted to lose weight, but at the moment, he doesn't want to be vegan, or he doesn't feel that he has to be. Generally speaking, it's a lot more difficult to do something that you don't want to do. I find it incredibly easy to be vegan, because I want to be vegan. Or to use Matthew's framing, I no longer see animals as food, and therefore I have no desire to consume their flesh or secretions. It comes down to conviction. When people like Vaush say that veganism is too hard, what they're really saying is that they lack conviction. Peer pressure and propaganda can wear down conviction over time, but Vaush postures himself as this machismo dude who doesn't bend to social pressure and can separate quality science from junk science. If he is the person he purports himself to be, he would find being vegan incredibly easy. Not to mention, Vaush is well off financially. He has the money and lives in a location where he could order prepared food from a bougie grocery store or highly rated vegan restaurant to satisfy whatever craving he's having at the moment. Anyone in Vaush's position who claims that being vegan is too hard needs a fucking reality check. People are dying, Kim. If you're not as well off as Vaush, I have a gratitude challenge for you. Go to Chipotle and order a very simple veggie burrito. Rice, beans, pico, guac, and lettuce. That's it. I know you're used to getting chicken and cheese and sour cream, but just leave it off. Sit down with your veggie burrito, and while you're eating it, think about the fact that people are starving in Gaza and eating boiled weeds. Rice and beans taste pretty fucking good, don't they? And the next time you're tempted to order a chicken and cheese burrito, remember this experience, and think of the 1 million cows and 202 million chickens that are slaughtered every single day. I love me some field roast sausage and Miyoko's mozzarella, but I could live without these things. I did live without these things. I was vegan for years before Miyoko blessed us with her culinary craftsmanship. The point is, you can make a delicious and satisfying meal without meat or cheese analogs. So the fact that we have so many of these products on the market makes it all the more easy to be vegan if you're not on a super tight budget. And this brings me to my beef with lab-grown meat. It's not that I'm against it. It's just that we already have plant-based meats that taste nearly identical to what they're replicating. So why are people sitting around waiting for lab-grown meat when plant-based meat is already widely available? As Sagar is demonstrating here, a lot of people will be disturbed by lab-grown meat, just as they're disturbed by plant-based meat, which is insanely ironic if you think about it for 5 seconds. You're disturbed by the idea of meat that's created in a lab with animal cells or plant protein, but you're not disturbed by the idea of slitting an animal's throat and eating their flesh. Lab-grown meat is not going to appeal to naturalists like Sagar, and it's not going to appeal to vegans, so I'm afraid that it's going to remain relatively expensive and inaccessible. Being vegan can be difficult, but not in the way people like Vaush think. What's actually difficult about being vegan is the mental toll of living in a world that's apathetic to the immense suffering of animals. What actually requires self-discipline, as many of you pointed out in the comments, is keeping your composure around people who don't seem to care. With all that said, I think it's important to acknowledge that people are different. For many people, it's not as easy as the flip of a switch. Some people, like Matthew, were able to go vegan overnight without much difficulty. Other people, like Chase and Plant Power Trip, had to exert self-control in the beginning. And there are many vegans like myself who transitioned away from animal products, which, now that I think about it, is a way to avoid having to exert self-control because you're easing into it. But some people struggle to go vegan and still struggle years in because they don't live in a supportive social environment. Without social support, the things you and I perceive as minor inconveniences are a lot more challenging to put up with. And as I said earlier, peer pressure and propaganda can wear down conviction. Not everyone has the fortitude to put up with these inconveniences. While I think there is a moral obligation to be vegan no matter your social environment, Vaush is not wrong when he says that our time and energy as a movement is better spent pushing for systemic change. Vegans make up about 3% of the population. But polls show that a significantly higher percentage of people would vote to ban slaughterhouses, and the majority would vote to ban factory farming. It's easier to convince people to support such measures than it is to convince them to go vegan. And if we saw these bans implemented in several major cities, this would drive up the cost of animal products and make plant-based the easier and more convenient option. People would have to go out of their way to eat animal products. This would eliminate the barriers that hold a lot of people back from going vegan. Vaush says we should push for systemic change over individual consumer change, and that it would be a lot easier for people to go vegan if we just got rid of animal agriculture. This is the exact strategy that Pro-Animal Future is deploying in several cities across the US that allow direct legislation via ballot initiatives. Here in Denver, we successfully got 2 measures on the ballot, one to ban fur sales and the other to ban slaughterhouses. To clarify, the legal definition of a slaughterhouse excludes backyard slaughter on a homestead for personal consumption. Currently, we are canvassing to persuade the people of Denver to vote yes in November. In Portland, PAF is planning a campaign that would require one-to-one plant-based menu items in large businesses, including company-run fast food chains and stadiums. Meaning, for every menu item that contains animal products, there must be one that doesn't. So if you want to support systemic change for animals, please donate to Pro-Animal Future, linked below. Vaush falls into the demographic of people we're trying to target with these campaigns. Those who are presently unwilling to go vegan, but on board with legislation to abolish animal agriculture. So Vaush, if you're watching this, please use your platform to draw attention to Pro-Animal Future, and maybe throw some donos our way. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. Alright, peace out.